Narration script. The morning sun climbs over London's financial district, its golden rays catching the glass and steel monuments to commerce and ambition. A Jaguar XJ pulls into a parking space on East Cheap Street. The driver steps out, locks the door, and walks away to attend a business meeting. He'll return in 2 hours. His car won't be waiting for him. Not in the condition he left it anyway, because while he's been away, something impossible has been happening. The side mirror has melted. The Jaguar's sleek panels have warped like softened chocolate. Parts of the bodywork have actually blistered and bubbled. The smell of scorched plastic hangs in the air. But there's been no fire, no vandalism, no apparent explanation at all. Just an expensive vehicle transformed into a Salvador Dali painting in the middle of one of the world's most sophisticated cities. The culprit? A building. Not a building housing criminals or terrorists. Not a building with faulty wiring or gas leaks. Just a building, standing there, doing what buildings do, existing. And somehow, in the process of simply existing, generating enough concentrated solar energy to cook a car like a rotisserie chicken. This is the story of how one of London's most prominent skyscrapers became a weapon, how a billion-dollar marvel of modern architecture turned a busy street into a solar death ray, how engineers, architects, and developers created something so catastrophically flawed that it literally melted reality around it, and how the warning signs were visible for years, ignored by everyone who should have been paying attention. Because this wasn't an accident. This was a disaster that was designed, approved, constructed, and unleashed on an unsuspecting city. This is the story of 20 Fenchurch Street, known to history by a far more ominous name, the Walkie Talkie. If you're fascinated by the spectacular ways human ambition can go catastrophically wrong, if you want to understand how brilliant minds can create terrible mistakes, then you're exactly where you need to be. Subscribe to System Failure for deep investigations into engineering disasters, technological nightmares, and the thin line between innovation and catastrophe. Because the truth is, every disaster has a story, and we're here to uncover it. Let's rewind to where this story really begins. Not in London, but across the Atlantic, in the desert heat of Las Vegas. The year is 2010. The Videra Hotel has just opened its doors, a sleek, curved tower designed by the same architect who would later bring his vision to London, Raffaele Vignoli. The Videra is elegant, modern, futuristic. It's also cooking people alive. Guests at the pool below the tower begin reporting something bizarre. In certain areas, at certain times of day, the heat becomes unbearable. Not the ambient heat of the Nevada desert, something else, something focused and intense. Plastic cups melt, towels begin to smoke. One lawyer, lying by the pool, has the hair on his head singed, his shopping bag actually melts and fuses to the pavement. He suffers burns. The phenomenon becomes so notorious that guests start calling it the Videra death ray. The problem is obvious to anyone who understands basic physics. The building's curved, reflective surface is acting as a massive parabolic mirror, concentrating sunlight into a focused beam. During construction, engineers noticed the issue and installed a film on the glass to reduce reflectivity by about 70%. But it wasn't enough. The death ray persisted. Eventually, the hotel was forced to install umbrellas and other shade structures to protect guests from their own building. Now, you might think this would serve as a cautionary tale for architects everywhere. A clear, recent, well-documented example of what happens when you build a concave glass tower that faces the sun. You might think that any architect who had designed such a building, who had witnessed firsthand the consequences of that design, would avoid making the same mistake twice. You would be wrong, because Raffaele Vignoli's London project, 20 Fenchurch Street, was already in development, and it featured the exact same design flaw. Except this time, instead of facing a hotel pool in a controlled environment, it faced one of the busiest financial districts in the world, a place filled with cars, pedestrians, businesses, and irreplaceable property. The building's design was distinctive and immediately recognizable. Roughly rectangular at its base, it bulged outward as it rose, creating more floor space on the upper levels where the views and the rent commanded premium prices. Then, near the top, it curved inward again, creating a concave face that looked out over the city. This curved glass facade was the building's signature feature, its architectural statement. It was also a massive solar concentrator waiting to happen. The developers were Land Securities and Canary Wharf Group, two of the most established names in British real estate. The project was approved by the City of London Corporation. Environmental assessments were conducted. Wind studies were performed. The building moved through all the regulatory hoops. But somehow, despite the Vidara incident being public knowledge, despite the basic physics being well understood for centuries, no one thought to model what would happen when that curved glass surface caught the afternoon sun. Construction began in earnest in 2011. As the tower rose floor by floor, the London skyline began to change. The building's unusual shape earned it a nickname, the Walkie Talkie, after the handheld radio it supposedly resembled. Some people loved it, many hated it. Architecture critics called it bloated, top-heavy, clumsy. The Carbuncle Cup, a prize for the UK's ugliest building, was practically engraved with its name before construction even finished. But aesthetic concerns were just that, aesthetic. What no one was publicly worrying about was the physics. By 2013, the building was nearing completion. Its glass skin was fully installed, all 37 floors and 525 feet of it. And that's when London discovered it had a problem. Not a cosmetic problem, not an architectural controversy, an actual, literal, physical danger sitting in the heart of the financial district. September 2013. The reports start coming in. A businessman parks his Jaguar on East Cheap Street. When he returns, the vehicle is damaged. The side panels are warped. The mirror has melted. He contacts the police, baffled. Then it happens again to another vehicle, and another. A van parked in the same general area sustains damage. Then a luxury vehicle has its badge actually melted off the bodywork. The pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Multiple vehicles, all parked in the same zone, all damaged in the same bizarre way, all during the same time of day, between 1 and 3 p.m., when the sun is at a particular angle, and all of them in the direct sight line of 20 Fenchurch Street. A local reporter decides to test the theory. He goes to the spot where the cars have been damaged, brings a frying pan and an egg. He sets them down on the sidewalk. The egg begins to cook, actually cook, on a sidewalk in London. In September, measurements are taken. The reflected sunlight is creating temperatures of up to 117 degrees Celsius, 243 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt plastic, hot enough to warp metal, hot enough to seriously burn human skin. The beam moves throughout the day as the sun tracks across the sky, creating a moving zone of extreme heat that sweeps across surrounding streets. It lasts for about 2 hours each day when conditions are right. But during that window, the area becomes genuinely hazardous. The media descends. Suddenly, the story is everywhere. The walkie-talkie becomes the walkie-scorchy. Headlines scream about the skyscraper death ray. Television crews film demonstrations of eggs frying and materials melting. The building becomes an international embarrassment. But more than embarrassment, it's a liability. Businesses in the affected area report damages. The owners of the damaged vehicles file complaints. The City of London Corporation, which approved the building, faces questions about how this was allowed to happen. And the developers, Land Securities and Canary Wharf Group, are forced to respond. Their initial reaction is telling. They don't deny the problem. They can't. The evidence is melted across half a dozen expensive vehicles. Instead, they issue a statement acknowledging the issue and promising to address it. But the statement also contains a remarkable admission, or rather, a remarkable omission. They don't say they were unaware this could happen. They don't claim it's an unforeseeable consequence. The clear implication, for anyone reading between the lines, is that the possibility was known, or should have been known, and they built it anyway. So how do you fix a skyscraper that's been turned into a functional solar weapon? The immediate solution is embarrassingly low-tech. They put up scaffolding and netting to block the reflected light. London, a city known for some of the world's most advanced architecture and engineering, is forced to drape a billion-dollar skyscraper in what amounts to a giant curtain to keep it from setting things on fire. This is clearly not a long-term solution. The developers commission urgent studies to find a permanent fix. The conclusion is obvious. The glass needs to be different. The entire south-facing facade, the curved section creating the problem, needs to be retrofit with a less reflective surface. This isn't a small job. We're talking about thousands of square feet of glass on an occupied building in the middle of a dense urban area. The work is complex, expensive, and time-consuming. But there's no alternative. Over the following months, workers replace and treat the glass panels, installing fins and coatings designed to scatter the light rather than focus it. The modifications reportedly cost millions of pounds, though the exact figure is never publicly disclosed. It's a staggering expense to fix a problem that could have been avoided with proper analysis before construction. Finally, by spring of 2014, the work is complete. The death ray is neutralized. The scaffolding comes down, 20 Fenchurch Street is safe, and the city tries to move on. But the questions linger. How did this happen? How did a team of experienced architects, engineers, developers, and regulators allow a building to be constructed that would turn into a giant magnifying glass aimed at the street? The answer is a case study in systemic failure, the kind that gives this channel its name. Start with the architect. Raffaele Vignoli is not a novice. He's an internationally recognized architect with decades of experience and buildings around the world. He had already designed the Vidara in Las Vegas and witnessed its death ray problem firsthand, yet he proceeded with a similar design in London. In interviews after the Walkie Talkie incident, he claimed the London building was different, that modifications had been made, but clearly those modifications were insufficient. Some reports suggest he genuinely believed the problem had been engineered out. Others hint at a more troubling possibility, that the aesthetics and the commercial demands of maximizing floor space took priority over physics. Then there are the engineers. These are people whose entire job is to model and predict how buildings will behave: wind loads, structural stresses, heat gain, light reflection. These are known quantities. Software exists to model precisely this kind of effect. A competent analysis would have revealed the focusing problem before a single steel beam was erected. Either the analysis wasn't done, or it was done and the results were ignored. We don't know which is worse. The developers, too, bear responsibility. When you're investing hundreds of millions of pounds in a project, you do your due diligence. You hire experts. You demand studies. You don't proceed with a design that has already caused problems elsewhere. Unless, of course, the financial and timeline pressures are so great that you convince yourself it'll probably be fine. Probably. And the regulators, the City of London Corporation, which reviewed and approved the project, planning documents are supposed to assess environmental impacts. Sunlight studies are standard for major developments. Did no one think to model reflected light? Or did someone notice and decide it wasn't grounds to stop a major commercial project? What we have is a perfect storm of failures at every level. An architect repeating a known mistake, engineers failing to catch it, developers failing to demand proper analysis, regulators failing to require it. Each group likely assumed someone else was handling the problem. Each group had incentives to keep the project moving forward. And so a building that should never have been built in that form was built anyway. The consequences were predictable. The Vidara had already proved it. The physics textbooks had explained it for generations. The failure wasn't a matter of unknown unknowns. It was a failure to act on known knowns. And that's the most damning kind of failure there is. Now let's talk about what this really represents beyond one embarrassing incident in London. The Walkie Talkie is a symptom of something larger, a pattern in modern development where commercial pressure, aesthetic ambition, and bureaucratic inertia combine to override basic competence. Consider the timeline. The building was proposed in 2007. The Vidara death ray became news in 2010. There were 3 years when anyone, could have said, wait, we need to model this. There were hundreds of meetings, thousands of documents, countless opportunities for the alarm to be raised, and yet the train kept rolling. Why? Because stopping is expensive, redesigning is expensive, delaying is expensive. And in the world of major development, there's always pressure to believe that this time it'll be different. This time, the problem won't happen. This time, we've accounted for it. Until you haven't, and suddenly there's an egg frying on a sidewalk in the financial heart of London, and the entire world is laughing at you. The deeper issue is this. Modern architecture has become increasingly bold, increasingly experimental. Glass towers of unusual shapes are status symbols for cities competing on the global stage. Curved facades, dramatic angles, ambitious cantilevers, these are the signatures of contemporary prestige architecture. And there's nothing wrong with pushing boundaries, but when you push boundaries, you must do so with rigorous analysis and genuine humility about what you don't know. The history of engineering is filled with disasters that happened because someone thought the rules didn't apply to them. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge swaying itself to destruction because aerodynamics were treated as an afterthought. The Hyatt Regency walkway collapse, killing over 100 people because of a design change no one properly analyzed. The Deepwater Horizon exploding because safety systems were bypassed to save time. And the Walkie Talkie melting cars because basic physics were ignored. The scale is different, but the pattern is identical. Ambition without discipline, innovation without verification, pressure without accountability. The final cruel irony of the Walkie Talkie is that after all the controversy, after the fixes, after the millions spent correcting the design, it's still widely considered one of London's ugliest buildings. In 2015, it won the Carbuncle Cup, the UK's prize for the worst new building. So it failed aesthetically, it failed functionally, and it failed as a case study in competent development. The only thing it succeeded at was making money. The building filled with tenants. The top floors house a sky garden that's become a tourist attraction. The commercial side of the equation worked out just fine, which tells you everything about the priorities that led to the problem in the first place. Today, if you walk down East Cheap Street, you won't feel the death ray. The modifications worked. The building is safe. But the scorch marks on its reputation and on the reputation of everyone involved remain. The Walkie Talkie stands as a monument to a simple truth. Expertise without diligence is worthless. Every regulation in the world means nothing if people are willing to assume the problem is someone else's job. And no amount of prestige, experience, or ambition exempts you from the laws of physics. Light reflects, curves focus, heat damages. These are not mysteries. They are facts. And facts don't care about your budget, your timeline, or your architectural vision. The story of 20 Fenchurch Street is one where nobody died. No catastrophic collapse, no loss of life, just melted cars and burnt towels and fried eggs. In the grand scale of engineering disasters, it's almost quaint. But it's also a warning, because the same attitudes that created the Walkie Talkie, the same systemic failures, the same prioritization of schedule and budget over rigor, those same forces are at work in projects all over the world right now. Projects involving bridges, tunnels, power plants, transportation systems. And in those cases, the consequences of failure won't be a melted Jaguar. They'll be counted in lives. So when you look at the Walkie Talkie, don't just see a funny story about a building that cooked cars. See a near miss. See a system that failed in a relatively harmless way this time. And ask yourself, what happens next time when that same system fails on something that matters more? Because there will be a next time. There always is. unless we learn the lesson, unless we demand better, unless we remember that every disaster, no matter how small, is trying to teach us something. The walkie-talkie taught us that you can't wish physics away. That experience doesn't guarantee wisdom, that the price of negligence is paid by someone, even if it's not always the people who were negligent. London learned that lesson the hard way, one melted side mirror at a time. The question is, who's learning it next? If this story reminded you why engineering matters, why competence matters, why we can't afford to cut corners even when the pressure is on, then you need to subscribe to System Failure. Every week we dig into the disasters, the failures, the catastrophic mistakes that shaped our world, because the only thing more expensive than learning from history is refusing to. Hit that subscribe button, and remember, every disaster has a story. Make sure you're here to hear it.